Alright, the raid is finally out and I'm proud to say that I managed to beat it with the help of some guys from the Ghost of Tsushima Discord. If you're looking for people to play with, you should definitely check it out. You can find the link for it in the video description. I will go over the raid's 3 chapters and explain some of the main puzzles that you need to solve, as well as going over some tips to help you out. This is not a walkthrough though, and I will not tell you how to find all the chests because I haven't found them all yet. But if you need some help with the mechanics or puzzles and some tips on how to get past all the chapters, then stick around. And if you're looking for cool builds to try, then check out my tips and builds, which I will link to at the end of the video and in the video description as well. Alright, let's start. Chapter 1 is by far the best chapter and it starts off with a pretty simple puzzle. You will see these glowing red orbs in a field where enemies spawn endlessly from these heart grapevine looking things. You need to kill enemies next to the orbs, and since the eruption mode is active, they will blow up after they die, dealing damage to the orbs and eventually destroying them. Some of these have a white crystal inside that you need to carry up a set of staircases and place them in front of a membrane looking thing that's blocking your way to the next area. There are only 3 crystals and all 3 appear in the exact same spot every time. It's going to be hard to explain where they are, but one of them is at the right side. There's a grapevine looking thing. To the left of that grapevine thing, there's one there. And the other 2 are much closer to the altar where you set the crystals down. Whoever carries the crystals cannot attack, and if you drop them by getting hit or something, they will disappear after 30 seconds and respawn back where you picked them up first. Throughout this, you will get a message saying that Io has started searching for you and eventually she will find you, which will cause your screen to get overrun with her face, which will end the raid. This timer mechanic is present throughout several stages in both the first and second chapter. After this first puzzle area, there is a platforming section with these glowy red orbs floating around. If you touch these, they will start slowing you down and targeting you. You can get away if you're fast, especially if the orb was going the opposite way that you were, but if you don't, you will get rooted to the ground and slowly die. Someone can shoot the roots or hit them with the sword to release you, but if that doesn't happen, you will go down, the roots will disappear, and you'll need to get revived. These orbs are also present in the next area, which is a small town with a gate and a well that gets activated once you step on it. What you need to do here is kill disciples of Io, which will spawn in the several houses around the town, and then run back to the well to deposit the soul energy. You will notice that as soon as you kill a disciple, you will get 10 soul potency, and that will start to trickle down immediately. You can kill several disciples to get up to 20, which is the maximum that you can carry at any given point. So as soon as you kill either 1 or 2, try to run back to the well as fast as possible. As long as you stay inside the radius, you will see the soul potency drop, which means you are delivering it to the well. Once again, this will have the Io timer mechanic here, which means you need to do this as fast as possible. Once you get the gate open, you will reach another platforming section, which will require players stepping on switches to turn on platforms and grapple points. You basically need to split into pairs at the start and help each other reach the end. This goes on for some time and will require you to get elemental powers to destroy some ritual circles at the end and open a door. This part is pretty straightforward and not unlike some of the previous story missions. You finally reach another area with some shrines that you need to interact with. Each of these will add certain restrictions and demand you defeat a certain amount of enemies without using specific moves or attacks. The closest one to the left blocks you from using ranged and ghost weapons, while the other ones block you from dodging or using your melee attacks and stuff like that. If you break the restriction by using the dodge or melee or whatever it is, the challenge will be reset and you will need to interact with the shrine to activate it once again. A good way to do this is splitting up into pairs and having someone get the enemies to low health, while the player doing the challenge finishes them off without breaking the rules. Once again, you get Io searching for you while you do this, but it's honestly not that hard to pull off. There are 4 shrines, so eventually everyone needs to complete one of the challenges. This is the final part of the chapter, which means you get to move on to chapter 2, which is by far the longest and hardest part of the raid. It took my group around 3.5 hours to clear chapter 2, so make sure that you're ready for it. In fact, here's a tip for any chapter. Make sure that you enable photo mode when launching with your squad, since this will allow you to pause the game by pressing right on the D-pad, which is great for taking a small break or discussing what needs to be done. Alright, Chapter 2 is a platforming hell that deals with a lot of the same concepts that you've already seen before in Chapter 1, but then takes them to the absolute limit. The first few sections are small combat encounters with platforming sections between them. 3 players will need to pick up elemental attunements, while the 4th player, the one without any attunement, will be the only one able to see the codes above the platforms that tell you which element activates which platform. You will often need to activate these platforms first by having the 4th player reach a switch from which he will be able to see the entire section and tell you who needs to jump in what order. Combat encounters here are relatively easy, except for some ghost enemies and linked enemies that you need to defeat at the same time, just like you did in some of the stories. You will eventually reach a huge arena with circular areas, one large in the center and one on each side. I see a ton of people asking how this works, so I will go over it in detail, as it's actually not that complicated. What you need to do here is have one player standing at each of the side areas, while 2 other players kill enemies in the large section in the middle. However, once you start doing this, the players in the middle section will start gaining corruption. Once corruption reaches around level 7, you will want to quickly run towards the circles at each side, one player going left and one going right. If you stay inside these areas, your corruption will start trickling down. So, what you want to do is alternate which players fight in the middle and which ones stay in the circles at the edges to stave off the corruption while keeping a steady flow of enemies being defeated in the large middle area. Do this fast enough and Io won't find you, the door will open, and you will be in yet another platforming section. This part is a bit trickier and has you using the magic arrow shot to activate platforms that you need to jump through before they disappear. At one point, you actually need to jump a couple of platforms to get to an elemental one, stay there until the other platforms disappear, and then reactivate them by shooting the blue thing with the arrow again, and keep going. I don't remember whether this part is in this section or further ahead, but keep that in mind. You eventually reach a large area with several enemies, attunement totems, ballistas, and switches. This part is kind of tricky since it has you fighting, platforming, and destroying totems and ballistas at the same time. And once again, you need to do this as fast as possible before Io finds you. My tip here is to defeat the enemies first and then focus on the platforming and get it done faster. Immediately after this section, there is another part with the red orbs and white crystals, just like the start of Chapter 1. But this is way harder since you have to deal with some attuned enemies and the red glowing orbs that can root you. The strategy is the same as in Chapter 1, kill enemies near the red orbs to destroy them, find the white crystals, and place them at the altar near the end of the area. Make sure to call out which enemies you want to shoot with the magic arrows to damage them, and remember that shooting them twice will deactivate their attunement entirely. I honestly do not remember which orbs had the white crystals because by this point my brain was starting to melt, but you can probably find that online in a couple of days down in the comment sections or find them on your own. After this, there is even more platforming and you get to the final area, which was the hardest part for me and my team. In this section, you will have to separate in either teams of 2 or 1 and 3, since you need to defend 2 large sacrificial pools that enemies will run up to and get their health drained. This will charge a totem, which will fail the raid once fully charged. So while 2 or 3 guys stay behind to deal with the enemies before they reach the pools, you will need someone to go across some platforming sections, get a white crystal, and carry it all the way back, while also having to fight several different enemies. You don't really get to choose who goes across the platforms, since you need an attunement to go through them, and they will only activate in a specific order, with the first one being the one on the left with the sun attunement. This part is, in my opinion, the hardest part of this entire raid, since any delay or failure in both getting the crystals back as soon as possible or killing the enemies before they get drained will fail the raid and you will need to start from a checkpoint. My tip here is to clear the path that you need to take with the crystals before you actually start carrying them, since if you get hit by an enemy and drop the crystal, it will respawn back to the start after a few seconds, meaning you cannot get tangled up in combat for too long. Whether it's better to have 2 players deal with the crystal and 2 defending, or 1 versus 3, I don't know. Once you place all 4 crystals, you will get rewarded with the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is much more straightforward, but it is still quite challenging. You finally get to meet Io face to face, and you will fight her both as a giant spidery thing and in a one-on-one duel. The way this works is as follows. There are 2 Torii gates, only one of which will be active at any given point. A platform on either side of the arena has a trigger that activates some platforms, allowing you to get to the gates. Only one player can go across them at a time, and upon doing so, they will find themselves in a duel against Io. Being able to deal as much damage to Io in this part is extremely important, so make sure that your dueling abilities are on point for this part. I recommend using the Master Katana for Chapter 3 due to the variety of different enemies that you will be fighting, and the fact that the stone stance seems to be the most effective one for fighting against Io. The rest of the team that remains outside the gate will have to fight against enemies that are trying to sacrifice themselves in 2 blood pools to charge a totem, just like the end of Chapter 2. Throughout this entire section, Io's giant spider-like form will occasionally say something, and you'll see blue orbs appear around her face or hands. Shooting these will prevent her from puking blood and charging the totem, but each orb needs to get shot twice. However, there is a catch. Sometimes more than 1 orb will appear, and when that happens, whoever is dueling Io will see a smaller orb appear around her face. This player needs to tell the other ones where to shoot, whether it's the up, down, left, or right one. This is absolutely essential, since failing to hit the correct orb will cause the totem to get charged very quickly, which will fail the raid. If the dueler gets downed, you can revive him with a Ronin, or pop him out of the duel by shooting a blue orb above the Torii gate. Shooting players out of the duel area will reset the totem, so this can be used strategically to buy some more time. And to make things even more complicated, whoever is dueling Io will slowly gain corruption, and if they reach level 10, the raid will end. This means you need to alternate who goes into the duel with Io to prevent the corruption from getting too high. I don't know if there is a way to remove corruption in this arena, so if there is, please leave a comment. So, shoot the blue orbs whenever Io speaks, duel her effectively, and kill all the enemies you can before they get too much of their health drained from them. Do this successfully, and you will get a short cutscene, after which you will actually need to fight Io once again, but this time is just regular combat. Once she's defeated, the raid will finally be over. Alright, that's it. Hopefully this will help you out in your attempts at defeating all 3 chapters. Please leave any discoveries or insights that you have in the comment section to help other players out. And if you enjoyed this video, check out the other videos I have on Ghost of Tsushima on the channel. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope I will catch you in the next one.